Prime Minister of Australia, Anthony Albanese.
After years of AUKUS acquiescence over the 2021 AUKUS submarine deal, one Labor backbencher has spectacularly broken ranks by questioning whether the party's original support for the $368 billion project should be reviewed.
That deal versus what we've got now are different, and I think that it now gives us a moment to think about whether or not the deal should be reconfigured or what are the contingencies.
Ed Husick's torpedo strike on AUKUS comes amid a raft of fresh concerns about the pact.
There's an issue about reality, and that confronting us about whether or not we will even get the new deal that has been put to us.
Triggered by Defence Minister Richard Marles's revelation over the weekend after meeting US War Secretary Pete Hegseth that instead of Australia receiving 2 used Virginia submarines and 1 new boat from the US, all 3 will now be second-hand. Marles insisted it's still a good outcome that simplifies the future submarine program.
I'd imagine that in the circumstances he's been placed, he would have to say that.
Ed Husick was dumped from Anthony Albanese's cabinet, where he was the industry minister with a direct interest in AUKUS after last year's election. Often a thorn in the government's side, he's now questioned the wisdom of a deal controlled by an unpredictable Trump administration engaged in deal-making with allies.
There is a question or a concern that exists in the broader Labor movement about that transactional element. The Defence Minister has spoken very strongly in times past, saying that that's not the basis on which we make this deal. But I think reality is reshaping the nature of the arrangements.
Ed Husick's intervention raises renewed questions about Labor's commitment to AUKUS, which was backed nearly 5 years ago by then opposition leader Anthony Albanese within days of it being announced by Scott Morrison, Joe Biden and Boris Johnson. The Prime Minister delivered a defence of AUKUS in caucus this morning, telling Labor's backbench that work on expanding the Henderson submarine base in WA is already going at full steam, as is broader technology cooperation with the US and UK. In a statement, Minister for Defence Industry Pat Conroy also said Labor's support for AUKUS has been taken to 2 elections endorsed by caucus and the party's national conference in 2023, when it was recognised for creating tens of thousands of jobs.
Ed Husick's call today for a caucus vote on the future of AUKUS is a direct challenge to the authority of the Deputy Prime Minister Richard Marles. It's a result of Labor's mismanagement of the delivery of AUKUS and Richard Marles' failure, along with the Prime Minister, to make the case for AUKUS among Labor's own supporters.
Internal unrest over future nuclear submarines is likely to intensify in the lead-up to next month's national conference, with a group of prominent AUKUS sceptics, some directly linked to Labor, today launching a public inquiry into the pact.
Why do we need nuclear power especially? I think that's a question that needs to be answered in the context of what kind of defence force do we need for the next 20 years. And I'm not sure that we've done that homework.
There's also concern that AUKUS is a drain on the rest of the military.
My fear as a former Chief of the Defence Force is that the kinds of expenditures and the kinds of workforce and the way in which we would go about supporting something like AUKUS might drain other parts of our defence force and leave us vulnerable.
Greens have also ramped up their criticism.
We're not just over a barrel with the United States. We have literally said to them, they can name the price. They can give us the biggest lemon in the fleet. Give us 3 of them.
You just said it was always Australia's preference to have 3 in service. So why was a new submarine imposed on us that we didn't want if that's the case?
There are many reasons why 3 in service would be simpler, lower cost through the training of staff, the sustainment arrangements, the maintenance requirements and all of those considerations.
The government's commitment to AUKUS remains steadfast, but there's no question that growing unease over America's capacity to deliver submarines as agreed and Donald Trump's confrontational approach to allies has once again emboldened critics.
We'll make the other point is about what's the contingency, what's the plan B. Friends, democracy calls.
Former Labor Minister and long-time environmental activist Peter Garrett is leading the new crowd-funded public inquiry into AUKUS, and he joins me now. Peter Garrett, welcome to the program.
Hi, David.
So you wrote a piece a few years ago titled "AUKUS Stinks," and that's an understatement. Do you really need an inquiry when you've already made up your mind?
Strong concerns, I think, are an indication of the seriousness that AUKUS presents for governments and for policymakers. But a strong concern is no impediment to participating in an open inquiry to allow the Australian people to ask the questions that they need to ask, to present their information, their thoughts, their concerns, and for experts as well to present to an inquiry of diverse views, because there was never a debate in the Parliament, David, as you and many of your viewers would well know, and that is a massive abrogation of the democratic process when the Parliament of the land has never stood up and examined this matter in any level of detail. And that's what's going to happen with this public inquiry.
But wouldn't it be perhaps a more credible exercise to have one with a little more impartiality, like a retired judge, for example, actually lead this inquiry?
Well, in your intro piece, you saw a former Chief of the Defence Forces, Admiral Chris Barry. He's one of the commissioners.
Yeah, but he's also on record, to be fair, saying the US is not a reliable ally. He said today he doesn't think Australia needs a nuclear-powered submarine.
Well, he's coming to that view because circumstances have changed radically over the last couple of years in relation to what happens in our part of the world, the likely prospects of what will happen on a massive investment. I mean, this is the biggest amount of money that the Commonwealth of Australia will ever spend in our lifetime to deliver submarines that may not arrive in time at all to be useful, and if they are to arrive, have so many questions and issues around them as to make any reasonable person say, let us have an inquiry about it, let us consider those issues, let us hear the arguments for and against.
Well, let me put to you the argument the government makes. The main argument for nuclear-powered submarines, that they provide the stealth, speed and range, and therefore deterrence that conventional submarines just cannot. It's why the US, China, the UK, India are all investing heavily in nuclear-powered submarines. Wouldn't scrapping AUKUS right now leave Australia more vulnerable in an increasingly dangerous world?
I think the opposite applies, David. If we have to wait until the mid-2040s or even the late 2040s or early 2050s to be delivered nuclear-powered submarines.
Well, we get one in 2032, to be clear, is the AUKUS plan.
Yes, but remember, the amount of money that's being spent goes partly towards assisting the Americans with their submarine building program to allow us to receive these Virginia subs. Now we're getting 3 used subs, but all these submarines aren't at sea at the same time. That's the whole point. It's a 1 in 3 ratio. Now, that amount of money could pay for many more diesel-powered, quiet submarines that could operate around the Australian coastline, could provide significant additional investment to the Australian Defence Forces, who will need that amount of money in an uncertain future, and could provide additional amounts of money for the social programs and the kind of needs that are really so acute now for Australians facing big cost of living pressures right around the country.
I understand that. I mean, you may be right that there are, some other diesel submarines that might be able to fit the bill, but where are they going to come from? Is there a risk that it's too late now? We're 5 years on from this whole decision. There's a risk of a capability gap if we don't take this Virginia-class submarine in 2032. Where else can we find a submarine?
Well, I'm astonished that we find ourselves in a situation where we're having a discussion about nuclear-powered submarines, the final AUKUS subs. They're not even designed. They haven't even been designed yet, never mind built.
No, but the Virginias
but remember, they get designed and the first 3 get built in the United Kingdom, and the United Kingdom submarine building program is in complete disarray. They at least had an inquiry which showed that very clearly. You could buy submarines off the shelf which would arrive sooner than AUKUS submarines which are not yet even designed.
So I mentioned this as crowd-funded, your inquiry, but I think you also mentioned today some unions are also chipping in, is that right?
Yeah, we have some unions, we have individuals, we have some grassroots organisations, human rights organisations and the like. Look, I think the key thing about having this inquiry is that this is something that should happen in the Parliament, But in order for Australians to better understand the stakes of AUKUS, we'll go out and do it as a people's inquiry. And we will take those donations from organisations that want to see this inquiry happen. We'll make it public, total transparency and accountability, and for me, really importantly, provide accurate, clearly understandable and accessible information about this issue. It's too important for us to end up having a debate that's confined to perhaps experts and the political parties, although that's very important, batting forward back and forth ideas and claims and counterclaims.
I'm interested in, within the Labor movement, what's going on and what you're picking up. We saw Ed Husick today. Some unions are also supporting this inquiry. Give us a sense of what the mood is that you're picking up within the broader Labor movement when it comes to AUKUS.
Well, I think there's a lot of disquiet in the Labor Party about AUKUS. I mean, Prime Minister Keating has made his views very clear, as has Prime Minister Turnbull, by the way, as you know. And I think that the rank and file, branch members and others will be maybe having a second look and saying, hang on, is this what we should be doing as a Labor government? And that is a healthy process if there's that examination. And we'll see on the run-up to conference and beyond. But look, I caution against us getting caught up in a bit of this, the excitement of, or whether or not it will become an issue within the Labor Party. I very much hope that it does. But it needs to become an issue within the Conservative Party, within One Nation. It's an issue amongst the Greens, to be certain. And that's because the cost figure itself is eye-watering. And we say 368 billion. That doesn't take into account the 10 or 11 billion that's been advanced for the upgrade of the Collins submarines, our own submarines, under a great deal of controversy. Neither does it take into account any amount of money necessary to actually safely store medium and high-level radioactive waste for thousands of years, something the Americans have failed to do up to now and could cost north of $100 billion. So really, when we talk about AUKUS, we're talking about $500 billion of expenditure of taxpayers' money for submarines that may not ever arrive.
We'll be fascinated to see how this inquiry progresses. Peter Garrett, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, David.